Hi Matt, Alex Black, Rio2. We're in the construction financing phase for our 5 million ounce Phoenix Gold project located in Chile. We're getting close to finality on that, and hopefully we'll be able to recommence construction in October of this year.
Hi, Matt. Peter Akerley, President and CEO of Erdene Resource Development. We're first movers in an unexplored portion of gold belt in southwestern Mongolia, the Central Asian Orogenic Belt, where we've discovered four deposits, and we're moving the first of those four through the construction phase, expecting to be at first gold this time next year.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. We like here to invest in advanced development stories and producers, slightly less risky than explore codes, but that it doesn't mean there's a completely without risk. We've obviously seen producers like Victoria Gold really slip up a little bit with their heap leach component. We've seen balance sheets being blown up. We've seen projects almost built, fall over and straight. I'm thinking Dave Reeves' Calidus project. I want to talk to you today about what you guys need to do to ensure the success of the build and get into production. For me, it feels like the best form of offense is defense. Alex, I'm going to go to you first. You're a heap leach project. You've seen what's happening. What are you doing to kind of mitigate risk?
Obviously, what people need to understand is that mining is not an exact science, and it is a business of risk mitigation in lots of aspects, whether it's finance, whether it's environmental, whether it's construction, whether it's operating risk management, etc. So, I think Peter and I both in the same spot where we've done our risk analysis. We've looked at what we're trying to create in both our projects, and analysing various aspects of those projects. Now, in the case of Victoria Gold and the failure of the leach pad, and not only them, but SSRM earlier this year, the failure of their leach pad, is a lot of people have asked, so how do we know your leach pad's not going to fail? Very simply. And obviously, all we can say is that we've done our risk analysis. Where we operate in Chile is, there are stringent guidelines that the Chilean authorities have put forward to the construction of leach pads and also tailings dams in Chile. And they're very conservative guidelines. We've decided to go even more conservative in respect to those guidelines, so that we're very much underneath the criteria that they require. And the other thing is we're operating in a seismic zone, so the whole of the Andes belt is a seismic zone, and so there are design criteria that we have to follow to prevent any issues. In the case of what we're doing at Phoenix, is that we've got very much a bowl-shaped valley that we're going to do a valley fill leach pad in. In the case of Victoria, in the case of SSRM, what I'm seeing there is that they've got a side fill. They're actually doing the side of a valley and filling the side of the valley. Different types of design criteria. Having a bowl effect gives you three sides actually that support the pad. But it's also how you stack the material. In the case of what happened at SSRM and in the case of what happened at Victoria, what you're likely to see is you've got a very fluid pad. And when I say fluid, you've got very small pieces of leach material. In the case of Victoria, my understanding is they crush to a ½ inch. I'm not sure about SSRM. But when you've got ½ inch material as opposed to run of mine, which is what we're going to do, which is coarse material, there's much more fluidity in respect to movement, and it's the way you lay down the liner, the way you put your overliner, which is material that you put between the liner and the leach material. So there's a lot of criteria there. So But that's not the only thing that can go wrong. Is some sort of leach pad issue. Is there are other issues that can go wrong in a mining venture, and all I can say is that is where management come into play to mitigate and manage risks and to make sure there are processes in place to continually observe what is happening in a dynamic sense to your project, whether it's leach pad, waste dump, tailings dam, plant, flow of water, and other things through plant, etc. So you need to have those processes in place. Too early to call what is the exact reason for Victoria. In the case of SSRM, I've been very vocal about that one because it's been silent running for 4 months now since that disaster happened, and in that case, 9 people got killed. So, it's a disaster on all scales. But we still don't know what were the causes of those various incidences. But hopefully, the industry will get to know it. I was talking to somebody the other day. It says it's almost like a plane crash. When a plane crash happens, in the case of a plane, there's usually a black box recorder, etc., and there's an analysis of what happened. But what the aviation business does is learn from what they find, and we as a business are dying to find out what happened at Victoria Gold, what happened at SSRM, so that we can put our radar antennas up and look for those particular issues that occurred in those situations.
Right, okay. And I don't want this conversation to be like too downtrodden, as we say in Scotland, because what we're going to do is point to the things that investors should be questioning, should be looking at, and need to be aware of, that management teams are looking at. And if they get it right, the upside is good. Okay, so that's the kind of the so what it is. The upside is good if we get all of these things right. But if you don't know what's wrong or what's broken, you can't fix it. All of those things. I better leap over to Peter. Peter, you had a bunch of different sorts of issues to deal with, certainly over COVID, in terms of movement of materials. Through well, I think everyone did, but you particularly had to kind of come up with different types of solutions. But you seem to have ended up at a good place with a good partner as a result.
We did, Matt. When you look back at the COVID shock, for us, it probably was a bit of a positive, in the sense that we hadn't really hit the ground with construction. We were about ready to go when COVID hit, so we slowed things down, but it allowed us to up our game in terms of studies and the design engineering work that was carried out. We had another year and a half to do that work, so it improved, at least on paper, what we had to deal with. So when we did get to that point, we were better prepared for it. We elected to enter a partnership with MMC. MMC is Mongolia's largest mining company. And the reason we did that was probably threefold. One was their injection of cash. They put in 40 million equity, and another $80 million of senior debt is being spent now. They bring mining expertise. And, Alex can see this, you've seen it, Matt. A lot of companies at our stage can say they can build a mine, but being able to do it is a different thing. And so for us to bring in people that had done it before, have 2,000 miners on staff, makes a big difference. And national contacts, national relationships. I've been in that country for 25 years, but I'm still not in Mongolia. And for them to bring the level of relationships they do as Mongolia's leading business conglomerate is a huge benefit to us. And today, we're out there 30% complete because we've entered that partnership, because we have not only MMC as a partner, but their affiliated companies who bring strengths in construction. They're employing their construction team at Rio2 under Rio Tinto right now. So they have that Western experience, which is hard to get in Mongolia. So being able to employ that. They have a power station construction company who's now doing an overhead transmission line for us from China to site. Those things wouldn't have happened without us entering into that relationship. So that was probably our, preeminent risk mitigation effort. But I would say, that extra effort on design, somewhat fortuitously because of COVID on our side, that partnership, and also in your development team, whether it's the board, management, or consultants, find people that have done it before. We brought on board people from Centera. Alex and I had a bit of a chat about Centera earlier, but the president of Centera is an advisor to us. Has been through that in Mongolia. It was there for the build. Became one of the most successful producers globally, actually, in terms of all-in sustaining costs, and others that have done it in Mongolia. So, yeah, there's a number of efforts you can make to bring those risks down. And there's still going to be some. We have another 70% completion to get through, and there'll be bumps along the way. But so far, so good, and largely because of the things I just mentioned.
And Alex, for you, what do you think of this? It kind of feels like a buddy system, right? Don't know if you had that at school. Older kids look after younger kids. You picking a local partner can be quite good. We certainly did a lot of that in Africa, and and even parts of South America on the oil and gas side of things. It helps. Do you think you could have benefited from that with your kind of recent shenanigans from the government, where you were kind of held up with Chinchilla Gate somewhat, or do you think that was unavoidable?
No. Unfortunately, no. That we wouldn't have mitigated that. And I've been through the issue and tried to explain we were in the wrong place at the wrong time with a new government. And I don't think anybody would have imagined what happened to us would have happened to anybody. So no, I guess I can understand what Peter's going through, and when we started off in Peru a few years ago with La Arena back in 2009, and I remember we said, we're going to build this gold oxide heap leach project in the highlands of Peru, and everybody was saying, well, have you done this before? I said, no. How do we know you're going to do it? And I said, well, we're technical people. We've been involved in studies and execution of projects, etc., in our past lives, and so we feel quite confident that we can do this. But there was always that overhang of, well, you've never done it before in Peru, and how do we know you're going to be able to execute and deliver? So what Peter's done, and what maybe some other juniors are contemplating and doing, is in teaming up with other companies, makes sense. I mean, it just helps validate the project, validates the execution of the project, and kind of diminishes that risk. Obviously, there's always execution risk, whoever you are. So it diminishes that risk, and so I can understand it. In our case, here we are with Phoenix Gold, and it's going to be our third run-of-mine gold oxide heap leach project that we build. So we've been through this dance before. But circumstances have changed. Track record, obviously, of these other projects that you mentioned, and we've been talking about, come up, and they sort of dirty the waters in respect to what we want to do, and what we have to do as a result is jump through a few more hoops in explaining how we're going to mitigate some of these risks that some of these other companies have been facing of late.
Right, but let me just stick with you, Alex, on that one. What do you think the smartest thing that you've done during this period is? Obviously, you kind of got held up with the whole kind of environmental component, but you'd also, of recent times, maybe re-looked at the strategy, re-looked at how you came at the project, which has an effect on the CapEx and the CapEx numbers, and perhaps did that de-risk things for you? Was that important to be agile?
Yeah, I mean, we're a junior company, so, and we're solely focused. We're a one asset company. So to go through the hiatus that we went through, I think the smartest thing we did was we held on to our key people here in Peru, who have been involved in these previous operations and construction projects. So we were able to maintain them. And now we're slowly building up our team in Chile, so that was a big part of it. Remembering we had already started construction prior to being held up by way of local permits we were able to get in place to enable us to do various things. So what we're going to go through now is more or less an assembly job, but keeping people. I mean, that's key, and I'm sure Peter will probably agree with me. having key people on your team and having them stay on the team through thick or thin is a very important part of success, I think.
Right. And Peter, for you, could you just pick up something Alex talks about? Obviously, he's got a single asset, single jurisdiction project. You've got, well, single jurisdiction, I guess. It's not necessarily single commodity, and it's probably, well, would you argue multi-mine as well, therefore?
That's right. We do anticipate this to be a multi-commodity, multi-mine district.
And that for you is a de-risking component?
Yes.
Or is it a liability?
Yeah, I think when you look at our vision here, we've discovered 4 deposits, as I said at the outset. This is a epithermal gold porphyry copper region. There's a number, obviously, what's going to be the 4th largest copper mine on the planet is in our neighborhood in Rio2 in the southeast. We have a very large copper molybdenum porphyry deposit. We have a large polymetallic gold, silver, lead, zinc project. So we do anticipate seeing them coming on in sequence once we get wind at our back in terms of cash flow coming out of Bayan Hyundai. So yeah, I do think for investors, that's a part of the de-risking, but more about the opportunity. It's just so rare on the planet today to go out into a new district where geologists haven't walked before and find 3 of our 4 deposits exposed at surface, up to 4,000 gram samples. So it's the opportunity that excites me.
Peter, can I ask a question? What are the commodities?
So gold, obviously, a bit of silver at Bayan Hyundai. 35 kilometers to the east, we have copper, molybdenum, dominantly molybdenum. Then to the north, the polymetallic is gold, silver, lead, zinc. So low intermediate sulfidation to the north.
Do you think the market understands what you've got?
No.
Because the minute what I've seen from experience is the minute you start to move around, like from commodity to gold, copper seem to go hand in hand, but then when you bring in polymetallic and then does the market understand that? Do you think?
No, I think you're right. I guess, thinking through this, though, when I look at our situation, we have only seen very rarely an opportunity to raise money in the public markets at reasonable valuations. So we've gone with this partnership that will take away the need for that equity support from the markets. And I do think the market will pay up for cash flow. So my view is that if we can avoid dilution, get the cash flow and bring on whatever commodity it is, that the institutions in particular will start to pay up for those projects coming on with strong cash flow.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, because in this business, for me, with the junior business anyway, it's building a balance sheet. Balance sheet gives you strength to do a lot of things, and without balance sheet, which is where we're at the moment, I mean, we're dying to create one and jump into this gold market as soon as possible, but it's your biggest weakness, right? Is your balance sheet. Once you've got a stronger balance sheet, you can then do lots of things and have the flexibility to do lots of things.
I haven't been in this market been in this business for 35 years and in this chair for 20. The pain of the equity markets is just all too apparent. And now to have vision on what will be $60 million a year in free cash flow coming out of this project at $1,800 gold. I think it gets up to about 90 at current gold prices, split between ourselves and our partner. But nonetheless, here we are, a $100 million market cap company with what will be $35 to $45 million a year in free cash flow. That will get a re-rating. And if I'm right about the exploration potential of this district, there's lots more room to grow beyond that. So that's the way we've looked at it. I see this as a foundation in a very exciting new district. And the market may fail to understand the complexities of what we have, but as I said, cash flow will bring that home when it's there in our quarterly statements.
By the way, Alex, I'm loving you jumping in with questions. You keep doing it, and Peter, also feel free. We started doing this last week, and it's great because to hear you guys with your experience talking to what you think is important, is I think should be important to listeners and viewers of this too. So Peter, just on the way that you kind of structure the company, and I think Alex brings a good point. Are you getting valued for the kind of the multi-commodity aspect of this? I think sometimes that's seen as a liability, because people are wondering where you're going to spend your time and money and allocate for the best return on that capital. With the MMC partnership, do you feel that, I mean, clearly you've got, they're a company who knows how to operate in country, knows how to build. You could start positioning yourself as something different. The moment you're trying to say, we are a miner in Mongolia, is there a different way of kind of laying this out where you have partners in country, whether it be MMC or others, who actually build these things out, run these things, and you just the beneficiaries of the kind of cash flows, or however you
Well, I think that's our mutual vision for what we've created here, that they bring strengths that we didn't have, and vice versa. They're not explorers. They don't have that successful track record of discovery. If we can continue to bring that to the table for them and they can operate and build, it's a perfect relationship. And that's how we see things moving forward.
But
I mentioned.
But how do I view you then? How do I view you? Are you an explorer, prospect generator? And because those get us much lower multiples, or are you kind of more like a PE firm, which gets probably different types of multiples? You know what I mean? How are you coming at this?
It all comes down to that cash flow again. We are 50-50 partners on that cash flow. And by the way, we've also retained a 5% NSR after the first 400,000 ounces. So the economics of this are about 60-40 on a net profits basis. So I don't think you need to view us as anything other than a cash flowing producer who happens to bring that set of skills to that mix of exploration.
You also get viewed by, differently by different parts of the financial community, like, private equity may look at you and they say, well, what's the PE ratio? What's their return on capital invested? And you get a different sort of multiple from different types of finance groups, rather than the kind of traditional, we're going to invest in a mining company type specialist group. So is that something you're conscious of? Is that something you talk to when you speak to different investors?
I don't think that we've had that feedback to date. I think our investors, which
you need to be a producer, I think, for us, but are you working towards it?
We have a host of institutions globally in the US, throughout Europe, here in Canada, and I think the view is really focused on cash flow in a new district that has strong potential for additional discovery. And that's what I'd say more the latter probably than anything else. The foundation that's being built by that cash flow is exceptional, but that upside in a new district that's produced this number of discoveries on relatively small investment is what is exciting investors. So you're really getting the best of both of those worlds. You're getting a nice stable base of cash flow, but you're still bringing that exploration promise to the table.
Right.
How I've got a question for you, Peter. How open is Mongolia from an exploration perspective? I mean, it's been a country of focus for, well, so let's say the last 15 to 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm. The issue is that since about 2009-10, the government clamped down on the issuance of new licenses. If you'll remember back as far back as 97, when we were both there, we held 5 million hectares of ground. We had 100 geologists all over the country. You'll find it very difficult to pick up new ground today. They issue postage stamp tenders occasionally. You can try to push the government to open up new areas, but it's been very slow. And that's probably the biggest reason you haven't seen a major influx of new investors. Now, mind you, you have Rio there, obviously, but you've seen Zijin come into the country here in the last 2 years. So some of the majors are starting to pick things up, but it's a challenge. And that's probably the biggest impediment to investment dollars coming in and new discoveries. We were ahead of that curve because we've been there that long and I think we've had over 100 licenses, as I mentioned, 5 million hectares at the outset, and we've evaluated over 3,000 prospects. So we couldn't do that today. This is really the benefit of long.
What's the current? I mean, I remember when I was there back in the late 90s, the dynamic between the Chinese and the Mongolians was pretty interesting back then. I remember we after flying out of Ulaanbaatar and we went into Beijing, and we were sort of sitting there on the tarmac for a period of time and just wondering what the hell is going on here. We were in a Mongolian Airlines plane or whatever the airline was called back then, and they said, if it's a Mongolian aircraft, the Chinese will make you wait until, as long as it takes. So
Yeah.
is that dynamic changed? I mean, I know the Chinese have put a lot of
You
money
bring,
into
bring back
Mongolia.
memories of my first flight in Mongolia on an Antonov cargo jet, but and the Mia helicopters. But in any case, that's changed dramatically, really, because when you think about when we first arrived, there was still the hangover of the Russian influence in Mongolia. Although they had departed largely in the early 90s, you still had that relationship. And, a relationship personally amongst the people of Mongolia from 90 years of living with the Russian people and not at all with the Chinese, who really exited in 1917. And today, you see, because of the economic might that China brings, that's starting to change almost completely. You see almost no Russian influence and a very heavy economic influence from the Chinese side, invested in oil and gas, lead zinc mines, Xinjiang Xanadu's copper project. And along the border, you'll see multiple blacktop highway, now rail for the first time being built into Mongolia, the first standard gauge rail built into the country near us. So you're seeing that build up. And yeah, it's been night and day, really flipped from what was remnant Russian to heavy economic Chinese influence.
Interesting.
Can I ask about? A geologist once said this to me. He said, like, we geologists, we get excited about everything all of the time, right? Because it's a voyage of discovery, and they like the science of it. They like the unknown, and they like sort of getting after it, usually with other people's money. So, yeah, but at the end of the day, the rocks don't change, the rocks don't lie, but. And you'll have all this kind of frontier, chasing down new discoveries in new places. But at the end of the day, the markets need to kind of get used to it. And you've both been affected by this, right? I think there was a kind of thing called the Mongolian discount on some pretty good assets. I think you probably, saw a bit of that, Peter. And obviously, recent constitutional change type conversations and socialist political agendaing. You saw a bit of that in Chile, Alex, as well. I mean, maybe for you, Peter, I mean, how have you dealt with that? Do you wish you had perhaps gone elsewhere? You've been in the country a long time now, and it's getting going now, but could you done better elsewhere?
Look, it's tough everywhere, not to name provinces or states who claim they are, the safest jurisdiction on the planet. Everyone has their issues.
No, go ahead and go and name them because, yeah, it blows me away how people go on about that. But anyway, go on, keep
Yeah,
going.
I mean, I've been in Mongolia for 27 years, and yes, we've had our issues along the way. But when I look back at the 27 years, we've had 100 exploration licenses. We've had no issues with them. We've been able to convert three of those now to mining licenses. We brought one through permitting in less than 3 years to the construction phase. Where else on the planet can you say you can do that? Even look at Rio2 is a mega project on the planet. How many copper porphyry projects in the span that they came to production did so? I don't think you can count them on more than one hand. And yeah, so Mongolia, like everywhere else, has had its issues, but no, I wouldn't choose another place to go invest in. I'll come back to what I said earlier. It's the rocks first. When you can find extremely high grade, unexplored areas that have the potential for supersized deposits, that's where you want to be. And you just have to decide that you're going to commit to get to know the country, the people, and try to make a difference for them as well as your investors. And that will feed itself into success in terms of ultimate
Peter,
production.
what's the population of Mongolia at the moment? About 3 million or
Mongolia is
something?
just over 3 million, with the vast majority moving rapidly into the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. It's probably close to half in Ulaanbaatar. So very low density outside of the capital. In fact, the area that we work in is the least densely populated place in the country, and therefore one of the least densely populated on the planet.
So obtaining social license is relatively straightforward in
You know,
comparison
it
to.
is, but it's funny. It doesn't matter if it's 10,000 people or 10 people. You have to treat those local people with utmost respect. And, you know, I'm sure it's the same for you in the countries you've worked in. You get to respect and really, respect the fact that you're a guest in that country, but the nomadic lifestyle in Mongolia is something that's very unique and something I'm proud to be a part of. So, like I say, whether it's 10 or 1,000, you have to tread lightly and be very respectful to that culture and that history.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the key to mining for me is the social license, right?
Yeah,
And it's just a very important component of success. And what I see is some people get confused about governments talking positively about mining, but they don't mandate mining. They encourage mining. They support mining. Governments, I'm saying, but at the end of the day, it's the people on the ground that are going to let you do that. You know,
that's right. And the
from
politicians will always follow suit to follow the
exactly,
electorate. And
exactly,
it all
exactly. And
comes
some
down,
people, some junior companies try and come down from the top down and say, "Oh, we've got government support," but they don't have support at the bottom. No, you've got to go from the bottom up and get that support at the ground level, and then push that up to the government levels.
it's an ongoing process of education, really, but getting people out there. We actually did some studies early on with UBC in a program called MITEX on how exploration companies can bring value from the very outset, or at least start to plan how they can bring value. And so we've been very conscious of that from the very beginning, and I think it's paid dividends for us. But it's a work in progress, and will be for the life of this mining district. You just have to constantly be out there, and there's always going to be people that don't want mining, and those that you have to work closely with to find some type of acceptable solution to move your projects forward.
You know what I find confusing when I speak to you CEOs is that you've all kind of got your process. You go, here's a set of rules by which I operate and work, right? And it works for me. And if I took those set of rules and applied it to another company, it probably wouldn't work. So as an investor, I'm like going, oh man, hang on. How do I feel my way around this and try and work out what's a good investment and what's not? What are the rules you think don't change wherever you are in the world, whichever jurisdiction, whatever type of metal, whatever type of mining that you're doing? What are the rules that don't change for investors or shouldn't change?
Well,
What do you think,
I know
Alex?
it's a cliche perhaps, but it always
Peter,
comes
go for
back
it.
to the management teams, right? You have to have people that are committed to not just their investors, but to stakeholders. As I just mentioned, if you want to find success throughout the mining cycle, you have to have a management team that cares about the places they work. You have to have the experience, and ideally people that have done it before. And you have to have the project, the right rocks. And I think those two things stand out above the rest.
Alex, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's several components to success, obviously, and management's important, but I guess it's how management empathizes and reacts and interacts with people on the ground. That's important as well. We feel that we're pretty well experienced here in LATAM at what we do. If Peter said to me, "Hey, we've got a project in Mongolia, we're going to, and we'd like your mining expertise to come to Mongolia," or something like that, I'd have to do quite a bit of research to understand how we adapt our way of doing business here to what we would do in Mongolia. So, look, it just depends on where you're working. But management and their empathy towards social considerations, not only at the beginning of a project, but as Peter said, for the life of the project, is very important.
It's interesting when you go back to 97 and arriving in Mongolia, and we go out and stake 5 million hectares and go do our exploration and not have to deal with anyone. And today, and I think I heard this on one of your shows recently, Matt, where one of the CEOs mentioned that you have to be an environmental specialist, a sociologist, and a cultural, paleontologist and cultural expert. And you have to just have a very broad base of understanding out there in that local community to find success today. And that's completely different from where we were in 1997 when we first went to Mongolia.
Right, okay. But I'm going to dig down on this management thing. If we're in violent agreement that management is key, and obviously the project too, but it's what management decide to do with that. There's a great phrase that's coined, I don't know, back in the 70s or something like that. And I think a lot of CEOs have taken this to heart and are really trying quite hard with it, which is like the key to success is sincerity. And once you can fake that, you've got it made, right? So I'm trying to work out, how do I discern real sincerity and real experience and with management teams that mean it care about it, and live by it, and those who just give it lip service. Alex, come on, you're very, very
it's all
vocal
about
on this
longevity
topic.
and track record, right, Matt? I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, people do give lip service to that, and they're found out very quickly. And there's a couple of examples that I'd love to talk about right now, but I'm going to get myself.
Go for it.
No,
Do it.
I can't.
Come on.
I can't. I will one day.
Why don't you say broadly, roughly, these are the sorts of things that are happening out there which I don't like. You don't have to name names then.
Yeah, you see people, you see groups go into countries where they've never operated before, and they go in because they've got a billionaire or somebody that's backing them, right? And they go, okay, we're going to push this project forward. Now, money's one thing, but it's their ability to get their social license and to cover off on the basis, because most of these guys are operating in countries, and there's been entrance into Ecuador, entrance into Peru, with billionaires behind them, etc. And I just laugh at it because that's not the secret, right? And in fact, when you go into a country, the last thing you want to talk about is the fact that you're supported by a billionaire, because that gets the antenna of the NGOs and smart, local organisations gets their antennas up because they just see dollars. So, yeah, it's all about track record, and unfortunately, there aren't a lot of good operators at that. Peter's group obviously is successful at that. Our group has been successful at that, but there's only a handful of people that have been successful at it. And it's just interesting. But it's the track record of management and their ability to I mean, in the case of Peter, he's an explorationist. He can find assets, but it's what's next. Once you've found that asset, deposit, etc., how do you execute and deliver to add value to that? Because at the end of the day, 1 million ounces of gold in the ground is not worth much unless there's a game plan in place to exploit that 1 million ounces or however million ounces you've got there. Peter, your thoughts? I mean,
just I guess on to the sincerity point. Either Alex or I could stand up here and say whatever we want. People can decide whether to trust us. But if you want to take it beyond that, for an investor, get out and talk to other people in the business. Get to some of these shows and get to know other CEOs, other executives, and ask them what they think about different management teams. Because as Alex said, it's a pretty small group of sincere companies that are out there to build something, build a mine, move these projects forward. And the industry knows who they are. And you get out there as an investor, don't just go one off and invest in one company, learn about the industry and talk to people at these events.
Yeah, it makes it a very small pool of people or groups of people that you can invest in if we stick to that. And I think, there's a lot of white noise out there. There's a lot of people claiming to be able to do the things that the guys you're talking about.
At the end of the day,
it's way too many companies. That's my point. There's way too many companies, and even the good ones, like the Newcrest of this world, or the Kinrosses or Endeavours or whatever.
All the time, guys going, okay, we're going to spin this out. We're going to do this, and then there's guys going, okay, we're going to set up a royalty company, and it's like, how many royalty companies? How many spin outs? How many, just. This business is being done a misservice by those sorts of people. I know of one junior group. Once again, I can't mention names because I'll get crucified. But there's one guy on the board that happens to be of a junior co that's got affiliations with his other junior cos, and he's a CEO of two of them, and he's on the other board. He's on the board of the other two, and he pulls in. I mean, you can get all this information from CEDAR. I'm no genius, but he pulls in $1 million a year in directors' fees and salaries. Right? He's never created anything, and I can't wait when I'm a free man. I'm going to say that guy has never created anything for anybody, and you people, being shareholders, are willing to pay him $1 million a year.
I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to your post-retirement interviews with Matt.
Yeah,
We all
I'm
are.
gonna
We all
do
are.
it. I'm gonna do it. And the thing is, and the list goes on. I mean, there's another junior company that's got an asset in wonderful Quebec, where everybody goes. And my impression of Quebec in 20 years is going to be a big, great crater, because there's so many bloody junior companies exploring for stuff in Quebec. They're going to dig the shit out of it. But anyway, at the end of the day, there's a brilliant company in Quebec. The CEO has been paid $1 million a year. And this is a junior company, doesn't produce anything. Being paid $1 million a year. I checked just the other day on CEDAR. The top 5 or top 6 named executives in the last 3 years have earned $15 million of remuneration, and they haven't produced anything. And they put out a feasibility study the other day that showed the project's not going to happen, right? And it just blows me away. And I just think that we've, unfortunately, because we're in that universe, we get all the blood sucked out of us because it gets spread out amongst all these other crappy companies, and that's the issue that we're facing with. There's just too many companies in this business, and
No question.
and many of them not doing anything, right? Or not going to create anything.
Yeah, there's just, as you said, too much noise, and the good companies are diluted amongst the masses. And
Yeah, you're getting tarred with the same brush, but we've talked about it many times off camera, all three of us with each other. It's the if you don't know the rules of the game, you can't play the game. And I think unfortunately retail investors, everything's heavily skewed against them because management teams, and I will also throw in some big names, big producer names in where the management teams are enriching themselves because in a way that I don't think is savory either, because we did a study of this recently on analystnotes.com where they're not delivering margin. They're delivering ounces but not margin. And quite frankly, businesses globally outside of mining need to make money to survive, and that's the name of the game. I think the whole thing's kind of needs a lot of work, guys. Needs a lot of work, but I hear what you're saying about the explorers. That's why we're sticking with developers, advanced developers like yourselves, de-risked.
But I think also Peter's on the right track, Matt, because he understands his strengths, and his strengths is discovery, right? And he's teaming up with a producer or a builder and a producer and money to advance his project, which will give him a balance sheet to continue to do his exploration. I think that's a good.
But he can also label himself as a producer, though, Alex, right?
No, yeah, I know that. But
right? That's the difference.
That's a great model. I like that model because he understands his strengths and weaknesses. But unfortunately, most juniors will get out there and say, we've got the best management team, we've got the most experienced management team. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and they never do, right? So I think this is the first time I've met Peter, and I think there's a good model. He's got a good model going there, which other companies can follow if they can find the right partner.
We think so. We like what they're doing, but we like what you were doing as well, Alex. I just wish you weren't so shy. Right, we better.
Yeah.
We better love you and leave you. But I really enjoyed the two of you getting together. I really enjoyed the two of you riffing off of each other as well. And that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff that I get to see, perhaps, and hopefully listeners and viewers will get to see more of, because I think it's a super way of learning what's really important, what really should be focused on. So, gentlemen, I thank you for your time today. We'll see you soon.
thank you, Matt. Nice meeting you, Alex.
Go Rio.
Nice
Go
meeting.
Rio.
Go Rio.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, go Erdene too. Okay, bye.